Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ethio-Digest and thank you for joining us. The Teddy Afro Saga, the song that rattled Addis Abeba. One of the most relevant and quickly developing stories in and around Ethiopia is the publication of ETORICA, a new album by Theodoros Kasahun. We will look at this astounding musical accomplishment by Theodoros Kasahun, also known as Teddy Afro. We will look at the direct impact and the weight the music has on the current political discourse and why it instilled chaos in Arad Kilo. Thank you for joining us. The emergence of Teddy Afro as an internationally acclaimed musician with a profound message stirred the music charts to put Ethiopia at the top. History was made when the young man released his new album on April 16th. The artist's sixth album featuring 18 emotionally charged and yet uplifting pieces, raising highly sensitive national issues in the backdrop of what some consider to be an idealist portrayal of Ethiopia, juxtaposed against the current untenable circumstances. The work that rightfully mesmerized our attention and discourse to a rather fundamental question of our mere survival as a nation has opened the floodgates that cracked the foundation of Abiy Ahmed's house of cards. The government's rejection to Teddy Afro's request to have a press release announcing the release of the album, and the controversy and the curiosity that followed it, prompted the artist to release ETORICA on his own YouTube channel. And since its release, the album has been viewed by more than 100 million viewers, a milestone that has never been achieved by any Ethiopian at any moment in history. More than the authenticity of the uniquely Ethiopian traditional Tizita scale, orchestrated, defined, and synthesized by a full range of string, brass, electronic, and percussion lineup of musical instruments, and sounds that are both local and imported. And more than the various genres he explored, whose roots range from centuries-old regional and national musical dialects to popular folk music, to Ethiopian jazz and reggae. And more than the poet's lyrical exuberance and his top-notch performing skills and flamboyance, and more than all these outstanding and masterful achievements that made Theodoros Kasahun unique, the popularity and timelessness and the timeliness of the messages and their celebration of resistance and defiance to tyranny rattled Addis Abeba. Because the most popular number in this chart, Dastal, does not only solicit the listener's attention to the suffering endured by Ethiopians, but it also recaps the song with an uncommon rendition of a coda that advised Ethiopians to raise their flag from the dust. Ansau, raise it. This simple-sounding allegorical phrase haunts the hell out of Abiy Ahmed's lexicographer and Dr. Daniel Kibret, who knows the weight of the word and the consequences of the message. But that's not all. The resonating characteristics of the message itself and its mobilizing potential are as scary to Abiy Ahmed as wood, thunder, and lightning. We find it worth looking into Teddy Afro's rebuttals to the silence's golden adage of the centuries. The poet clearly reminded his listeners about the most devastating and tragic consequences associated with staying silent. This, as far as anyone is concerned, is a call to action. It is a call to bring forth the voices of Ethiopians to the forefront of our discourse. Theodoros Kasahun nostalgically and proudly chanted heroic phrases and motifs, originating and associated with the nation's glory, the sacrifices paid in the anti-colonial war of resistance that has always guaranteed our independence. Very little needs to be said about the Abiy Ahmed Daniel Kibret-led campaign against Teddy Afro, his music and his message. That's not only because we have more things to talk about, but also because we find the understanding of the messages outlined and intertwined in this single number need to be the focus of our discourse. In that respect, we need to elaborate on a critical factor the song proved to us. The fact that it is not a mere lamentation about lost love, lost childhood, lost manhood and lost womanhood and country. It is not your common requiem or your prayer for the dead. No, it is way more than that. Let us first look at the meaning of dastal. Das is a traditional temporary shelter built to hold a large number of people for some kind of gathering, for both festive or mournful occasions. In short, it is not your typical backyard gazebo. Teddy Afro is telling us to construct the das we will occupy while mourning. After the pain and suffering and betrayal and humiliation of Ethiopians, the musician spelled out to us. He didn't just ask us to mourn in the das. He finds the das to be the starting point to begin the march towards the higher ground and raise the flag. And that's not all. He gave a reason why it would be mandatory to rise up and resist together. The lyrics of the now infamous argument about silence being detrimental went like this. When out of place, silence is not golden anymore. Did not save those 12 sheep from being devoured by a lone tiger. One stanza after another describe the less fortunate souls who have lost everything and are left to mourn. Lyrically as well as melodically, the pain suffered by Ethiopians as a result of being betrayed by a trusted someone, the abuse and exploitation of Ethiopian women in the Arabian Peninsula and the Middle East, and an open protest to discrimination at home are showcased in this musical anthology. But what many critics and admirers failed to recognize was the artist's departure from a mere melancholic realm of pessimism that initially established the theme of the song to a rather specific logical resolve. Theodoros Kasahun asked the most profound question that captivated every listener. The question was this: where can one go to mourn the dead after one has lost the motherland? The poet elevated and augmented the sorrowful dissonant colors in tone and orchestration to the realm of reason and logic and harmony. And in doing so, he understandably arrived at an inevitable deduction that compelled the author to call on everyone to save the nation. The syllogism embedded in this articulation recurs in the young man's elevated theme, Ansau, raise it. What does that mean? Teddy Afro artfully painted the fall of the symbolic flag representing the nation and followed it by spelling out the generational obligation to raise it. This is the challenge Mr. Kassan brought forth in his masterful, timeless piece. Without shying away from pointing to the falling pillar and the leaking roof of the metaphorical house that mirrored the continual falling of the nation, Mr. Kassan cleverly describes the divisive and hate-mongering politics as the root cause of our suffering. But then, for those who are curious about the craft of the man and for those well-versed in the areas of art, Dastal begins with a rare and yet curious and settled chord progressions that introduced an uncompromising crescendo that worked its way through a nostalgic and flawless and yet haunting recitativo. The maestro remarkably exacted the ultimate authentic cadence on a higher octave on the same F major ትዝታ scale. But right before landing on a higher octave and a higher ground, he laid his arguments one by one while revolving around the dominant chord. He dwelt on the critical social and political issues and bitterly dismisses anyone who questions his Ethiopian identity. Ladies and gentlemen, whether one agrees with everything Teddy Afro stands for or not is something else. But as far as we are concerned, that transformation from a mere melancholic tone to a confidently laid bass line to lay out his argument was a class act. And then he surpasses expectations and marks his departure from a passive descriptive state to mesmerize the finale towards a specific action plan, raising the flag. Raising the flag, then, is nothing more and nothing less than reviving the dying nation. Thus, the composer deliberately elevated the music and the message that stepped up to the moment and delivered what amounted to be a call to action. Ansau, raise it. Without any exaggeration and without any bias of any sort, his name will tower above most lifelong politicians and dynasties, and his song will resonate across the globe as the song of the rightful resistance movement. The same song will be referred to as the song that rattled Addis Abeba. This will underscore the undisputed crowning achievement of Theodorus Kassan in the annals of history. History books will register how one musical note, in this case the fa in the do-re-mi scale in the key of C, struck twice in succession, accompanied by two words, das and tal, became the change maker in Ethiopian history, only to be superseded by the same notes played at the end, but this time the words were different. Ansau. It means raise it, referring to the flag. Teddy Afro is but consistent in his optimism. His Dastal trilogy consisting of the initial defeatist narration, followed by an extensive argument against the systemic illness of the day, and ending with the high note. The artist's uncommon craftsmanship in extending that optimism to the rest of the ETORICA album was manifested when he wrapped up the album with a piece titled Jumber. He is referring to the daybreak that is approaching. Colonel Ahmed, on the other hand, and his media empire led by a well-known slanderer and lampoonist Dr. Daniel Kubrat, have done everything possible to silence this call for justice and this appeal for human rights. They have banned Teddy Afro's music from being played on government-owned television and radio channels. They have also instructed these outlets not to discuss the person or his work in their programs. But all of that failed to work. The colonel's pleading to the public to denounce the young poet fall on deaf ears. And this caused Abiy Ahmed Ali to resort to the only choice he is well versed in, namely the jumping of the gun, also known as violence. Mr. Ahmed started by detaining and beating hundreds of Ethiopians for the crime of listening to Teddy Afro's Dastal. Teddy Afro's partners in putting the production together and promoting this historic album were detained and beaten. Yosef and Mahalet Solomon, also known as Hannah Solomon, are such victims whose whereabouts are still unknown. Teddy Afro's Abu Gida studio was raided by security forces who ransacked and vandalized the place. After physically abusing and threatening and beating the security guards at the studio, armed government units took several electronic equipment, confiscating the artist's unreleased works, notes and sketches. They also tried reciprocating ETORICA and paid 20 million Ethiopian birr to a couple of clowns to produce a song. But that Dogon pony show was dead on arrival. Yes, in Abiy Ahmed's Ethiopia, the death of free speech is official. In markedly the most desperate attempt to reverse the impact the song has on the nation, all sorts of atrocities, including intimidation and unlawful detentions, are being carried out by the junta in Arat Gila. These unheard of clatter and chatter and rattling within the inner circles of Abiy Ahmed's criminal organization paint a vivid realization of monumental failure. Abiy Ahmed has lost it all. Federal police had no shame making a statement claiming that the government has nothing to do with the detaining and beating of Teddy Afro's partners and the ransacking of the artist's studio in Addis Abeba, all of which were witnessed by plenty of people. We may never know which criminal network or group of the government's intelligence units carried out these acts, but we have no doubt that the orders to harass and attack Teddy Afro and company came from Colonel Ahmed Ali. We should only warn Ethiopians around the world and all who cherish his art that for the man of the hour, also known as Teddy Afro, things might get worse before they actually get better. Abiy Ahmed will not hesitate to commit the most heinous crimes to quench the extraordinary egalitarian and optimist approach of Ethiopians in ending his tyrannical regime and building a new democratic Ethiopia. And he rightfully considers Teddy Afro as the undisputed voice of the war of liberation. We have no doubt that the government's alarming reaction to Mr. Kasahun's music and message and the government's repression of freedom of speech has significantly contributed to the overwhelming curiosity and enthusiastic response by Ethiopians. Overnight, Dastal, became the national anthem for the liberation movements across the land. And to say the least, Ethiopians have heeded the message of Teddy Afro and have embraced the call with open arms, which would take us to an entirely different but critical issue tied to the struggle of survival, namely the formation of a resistance government by Tigrayans that defied Arat Kilo. Ladies and gentlemen, we will address this critical and decisive development in Tigray in the following episode. Please join us as we explore the crisis and what it means to the rest of the country and the region. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our presentation for the day. Thank you for joining us, and we wish you the best of times.